Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Hope everything is going well for you. The purpose of this video lecture is to talk a little bit about our next essay project, which is a definition essay. And we've been focusing on two other types of essays so far this semester. If you think back to the beginning of the semester, we looked at narrative, then we did an essay assignment around the common read, and now we're working ahead to the definition essay. So if you think back to the narrative essay, we focused a lot on our own personal thoughts, beliefs, and ideas. With the commonplace book, we were using an outside source, primarily a book, in order to write that essay. And this essay project with the definition essay, we're going to be looking at and using three external sources that I will provide to you related around the topic of grit. And so we are going to look at and focus on this idea of grit. And we're going to try to come up with our own definition of grit, what we think grit really means. And I don't want to get ahead of my skis or ahead of the module here in that discussion. So you'll learn a little bit more about what grit is later on. But basically, we're going to look at three theorists who have looked at and focused on different aspects of grit. We're going to look at Angela Duckworth. We're going to look at Carol Dweck, who is a psychologist and a professor at Stanford University in California. And then we're going to look at another theorist named Daniel Pink, who looks at grit from the idea of motivation, rewards, and punishments. So we're going to look at kind of what those three theorists have to say about this concept of grit and help us come up with our own definition or determination of what grit is. And I think that's really important for us as we think about who we are as individuals and as we go through various circumstances and experiences in our lives. Sometimes what gets us through and what gets us through some of those difficult and tough times is this concept of grit and maintaining grit and being able to have a growth mindset and perseverance and moving through difficult circumstances. So I think that'll be really interesting to look at and focus on over the next couple of weeks. Plus this skill of managing multiple sources, having more than one source to deal with as you write an essay is something that you're going to be dealing with a lot as you go through your college career, and something that you can also carry over as you leave college, as you get into a more professional work setting. So much of the writing that we do is our own thoughts, beliefs, and opinions, certainly, but a lot of it is looking at what other information already exists about a particular topic and learning how to meld those two things together, our own perspectives along with the information from outside sources. So I wanted to talk for just a few minutes about the definition essay. And I'm using a new program here with this PowerPoint as I start this off called SlideShare. And I really like SlideShare, but it doesn't always make the best presentation type of software. So give me just a second here. Okay. All right, here we go. Let me start back at the beginning. And okay. So bear with me here as I try to sort of navigate SlideShare. I'm much more used to PowerPoint, but I think this is going to work out just fine. So I mentioned to you a little bit about the definition essay, and I just wanted to talk briefly about what a definition essay is, if you're not familiar with this term, with this concept, and what it is and how it's going to apply to the topic of writing about grit. So what you might want to do is, if any of this seems like it's going fast, or if there's anything that I'm sort of skipping over that you'd like to know more about, you can certainly pause this presentation at any time or go back and watch it for a second or third time if you need to. I do think this presentation will be very helpful later on when you're writing the essay, when you're writing your definition essay about grit, to be able to go back and review this material again, because I think there's some information in here that may not seem very valid right now, or you may be thinking, well, what does this have to do with what we're doing? But later on in the unit, I think it will. So let's talk about what a definition essay is. As I said, this is not always the most easy thing to use. A definition essay, when we talk about a definition essay, what are we talking about? We're basically talking about an essay that takes a word or a concept and looks at it from a variety of different perspectives. Now, when you're doing a definition essay and you think definition and what that term means, you certainly can look at and focus on the actual definition. Literally, what would a dictionary, what would Merriam-Webster's dictionary, or what would dictionary.com say this particular concept or term actually means? And that's certainly something you can think about with the definition essay. But basically, what you're really trying to do with this type of an essay is to help the reader understand the meaning of an unfamiliar term and help the reader understand and see different perspectives around that term. Even if it's a term that they have common association with or a term that they know very well, oftentimes the definition essay will turn that on its head a little bit and give the reader a different type of perspective in terms of some additional things to think about or additional ways to consider how that term might actually work or actually function. So that's what we're going to do with grit. We're going to look at grit from a variety of different perspectives using Duckworth, Dweck, and Pink, as I was talking about a moment ago, and kind of see how they unpackage this concept of grit as we think about what that is and why that's important. So here's just a couple of ways of what I'm talking about with a definition essay. I mentioned one of the things that you can do is literally use the dictionary definition of what a term actually means. But what a really good definition essay does is unpacks that a bit and goes into some more detail and gives a variety of different perspectives related to that term. So I put an example here of a rat. A rat, when we talk about a rat, if you say the word rat, most people are going to think of a rodent. They're going to think about the little thing with 4 legs and a tail that gets into your garbage and causes all kinds of problems and is gross and hard to get rid of. Some people may think of it in a different way, and that is the connotative meaning, which is a person who tattles on other people or who exhibits undesirable or dishonest behavior. So that is another version of rat. Don't be a rat. Nobody likes a rat. You maybe have heard that term. What are they talking about? Nobody likes someone who tattles. Nobody likes someone who is put in a situation where their sole responsibility is to go to someone else, usually someone in a position of authority, and tell that person all the bad things and all the terrible things that this other person or this other group of people has been doing. So that's an example of unpacking a term and defining it in different ways. You've got the sort of the literal definition, and then you've got the connotative meaning. Here's another example, card. When we think about card, if you hear that word card or you use that word card, people are oftentimes going to think about a card like you actually would carry in your wallet, or a playing card, which is basically a sturdy but small piece of rectangular shaped paper used for business purposes or card games. But so that's certainly a definition of card. But also what you're thinking about is a different meaning. If you've heard the term card used in a different context, oftentimes it means someone who is lively or entertaining. Who's on the card tonight? Well, that has 2 connotations. Literally, who's written on the card tonight? But if you hear that expression, what actors, what musicians are on the card tonight? Basically, they're also talking about the connotative meaning, if you've heard that expression used, which is a person who is entertaining, a person who is lively, a person who brings a certain skill set or a certain talent to a situation or an environment. And we also can think about carding being showing me your card. Show me your card. I need to see your card. You got a card? What does that mean? Are you legally able to identify that you're of a certain age to purchase and consume certain products? So card has multiple meanings. We've got the physical card. We've got card in terms of for entertainment and talent value. And then we have the term card or carding for basically showing your identification to prove that you're a certain age. So that's kind of how a definition essay works. You're looking at a term or a concept through different prisms, and we're going to do that with grit. Certainly, if you looked up the dictionary definition of grit, you would certainly find several different meanings associated oftentimes with that term. And so we're going to have Duckworth, Dweck, and Pink help us with that. Something else that a definition essay does, it can also demonstrate someone's beliefs or interpretations of a particular term or concept. So I put an example, success and beauty. You hear that term, or you think of that term success. Success oftentimes in our society today means getting rich. If you're successful, it means you've got a lot of money, you live in a fancy house, you drive an expensive car, you go on vacation to fancy places 2 and 3 times a year. You've got plenty of money to do the things that you need to do. But another way that you might personally interpret success would mean overcoming obstacles or other unique interpretations. So sometimes if you think about that term success, it's not just money and wealth and material possessions. It oftentimes can be being successful, overcoming a challenge or overcoming an obstacle in your life that you're able to turn around and then say, hey, I was able to conquer that or accomplish that, or look back and say, look at everything that I did to get to where I am right now. That's another way of looking and unpacking a definition for a definition essay. I put another example, beauty. We hear that word used a lot in our society and in our culture. Oftentimes, a lot of people think of beauty as being physical looks. Oh, you're beautiful. Meaning, if you're a man, you're muscular and you have a strong jawline and you have perfect hair and tan skin. If you're a woman, you have long flowing blonde hair, a pretty face, nice makeup, whatever it may be. A lot of people think beauty means that. But another way that you could interpret beauty from a different perspective would be forgiving, other unique interpretations. Forgiving someone is oftentimes a beautiful thing. Nature, oftentimes, when you see a picturesque setting or a picture of the woods or the mountains or the river or something like that, you look at that and you think, wow, that is really beautiful. That's not the same kind of beauty we associate with a man or a woman or a child or an individual, but it's a different kind of beauty. So the personal interpretation might be that, or it could be a variety of other different things. And so you can think about approaching definition essays in this way also, in terms of what is your personal feelings and thoughts. And you're going to do that with grit. You're going to kind of look at what Duckworth, Pink, and Dweck say about grit and kind of determine what do you think are the most important components of grit based on what they have identified and what they have researched and what they have provided with regards to that term or concept. And you can also demonstrate the characteristics or the functions or the makeup of a term as well. And I just put a couple of examples here. Axe, this is more of what composes a term. Axe, it chops trees and splits wood. It's made up of a wooden handle and a metal head with a blade usually on one side. And then I put another example, machismo. If you hear that term, well, he's got a lot of machismo. We're talking about someone who really has a large inflated ego of themselves. Oftentimes, this can be characterized by dominating other people. It could be women. It could be children. It could be students. It could be a section of people or a subset of people where this individual has power or authority, either physically or environmentally, over that group or that individual, and uses that to their advantage. And so you can also think about that. Now, we're not going to look at physical characteristics of grit. Obviously, grit doesn't have a handle. It's not used for splitting wood. Doesn't have a metal blade on it like an axe does. But we're kind of looking more from grit as sort of an ethereal thing like machismo. It's not something that you can physically hold and grab and use in some way, but it's sort of an ethereal way of thinking, way of understanding, way of acting and behaving. And so that's kind of the approach we're going to take here. So this is basically how you would set up a definition essay. And again, this might be something you want to pause and look at or take notes on. And certainly I would encourage you to come back to this in a couple of weeks when we come back to writing the essay on grit. You certainly want to have the introduction. You want to lead in and identify early on that you are defining this concept of grit. And why, broadly speaking, you think grit is important. And you want to work your way down to the thesis statement. I didn't use grit here, but a lot of you all like to use this sort of three-tiered or three-pattern thesis statement. And I put an example here of country music. You could certainly, think about grit as being, grit is the characteristics that encourages perseverance and encourages a growth mindset and also encourages a firm understanding of rewards and punishments. That might be a good thesis or a beginning of a good thesis for this essay. So you guys are pretty good at writing introductory paragraphs. I don't think there's much more I need to say about that. But that's something that you are going to want to have a traditional introductory paragraph for an academic essay that I know you guys have experience with writing in this class and in other classes and in your previous educational experiences, high school and so forth. This is kind of a basic breakdown of the body here. I put 3 paragraphs here. You're certainly more than welcome to use more, and you probably will use more. But ideally, if you're thinking about how to do an essay on grit, you're going to have a paragraph devoted to each of the theorists. So you'll have one paragraph that pulls some concepts from Angela Duckworth. You'll have another body paragraph that pulls some concepts from Carol Dweck. And you'll have a third body paragraph that pulls some concepts from Daniel Pink. And we'll look more at those concepts, and you'll have a chance to read and kind of think about those and do some writing on those later on in the module. but you're basically going to want to follow the traditional structure of a paragraph for this particular section of the essay. You're going to want a topic sentence, supporting details. You will be using evidence from those theorists and from the sources that I provide for support, just like you did for the common read essay. You did the same thing. You pulled information and quotes and details from that source. You're going to do the same here. You'll have a paragraph that pulls some sources from Duckworth, a paragraph that pulls sources from Dweck, and a paragraph that pulls sources from Daniel Pink. And again, you may find that you want to focus on 2 or 3 primary characteristics from any one of these theorists, and that's certainly okay. If so, then you'll need more than one body paragraph per theorist. But this just gives you a rough template and a rough outline for how to approach this particular essay. So if you want to pause that and take some notes on it, or just file this away and remember to come back to it later when we get ready to work on the essay, that would be good. And then lastly, you guys are really good with conclusion paragraphs too, so I don't really have a whole lot to say about that. But you do want to map up the main points and point out the significance. Leave the reader with kind of a final takeaway or a final impression of what this concept of grit actually is. So that's how we're going to set up the definition essay, and that's one of the ways to think about and look at definition essays. You know, it's the connotative meaning, it is the characteristics oftentimes associated with that term. Like we talked about axe, it's got a handle and a blade, and you have to swing it forward to get it to do anything. But it's also our own personal interpretations, like we were thinking about rat. You know, rat is, yes, the physical rodent, but it's also an emotional or personal characteristic in which someone is kind of serving as a tattler, or someone who's tattletaling and trying to get other people in trouble. So those are kind of the 3 focal points to think about with a definition essay. And so as we move through the module this week, we're going to unpack that idea, this concept of grit. Certainly, we're not going to focus as much on the literal definition of grit, but we're going to focus more on kind of that interpretive aspect of grit. And we're going to look at how Duckworth, Dweck, and Pink interpret that concept of grit going forward. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of explain what this type of essay is if you're unfamiliar with it. I think a lot of the skills and things that we work on will be helpful not only for this essay, but as I mentioned earlier, synthesizing several sources about a particular topic. It's going to help you in this class when we get to our last essay, our iSearch essay, but it's also going to help you in other college courses as well when you're managing multiple sources and you have to write or give a presentation on multiple sources, using multiple sources. It's going to be helpful. And it's also something you can take away with you as you go into your career once you're finished with school. So that's all I had to say for today. As always, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns about anything in the module or anything related to the class, and I'll talk to you again soon.